Ambassador Thrax of the Vorn Empire leaned forward, his four eyes blinking. In sequence, a gesture his species used when delivering a killing blow in any debate. The galactic assembly chamber stretched. Around him, a perfect sphere of polished metal and floating holographic displays, each station representing a different world. His voice carried across the space with practiced contempt. Once again, humanity requests expansion. Rights into the Signian expanse, Thrax said, his translator unit rendering his words into universal standard with surgical precision. Once again, I must point out the absurdity of this request. He paused, letting the silence build. The chamber held representatives from over 200 species. Most of them already knew what he was going to say. That was the point. Let us examine the facts, Thrax continued, his claws clicking against his console. In the 2 centuries since humanity achieved faster than light travel, they have produced exactly 4 ship classes capable of interstellar operation. Their largest vessel, the Enterprise, measures 600 m and requires 3 months to traverse a single sector. They have no energy shielding, no directed energy weapons, and their propulsion systems are based on principles we abandoned before my grandfather's grandfather hatched. A ripple of amusement moved through the chamber. The Krell delegation, a species of insected merchants, clicked their mandibles in what passed for laughter. The Triarchic representatives, 3-headed reptilians, swayed their necks in agreement. You ask for territory, Thrax said, his voice dropping to something almost gentle, almost sympathetic. You ask for resources, but you offer nothing in return. Your shipyards are primitive. Your technology is borrowed. Your military is, he paused again, savoring the moment, adequate for defense against pirates, perhaps against a true interstellar power. He let the question hang. The human representative, a woman named Ambassador Elena Rivaz, sat motionless. Her dark hair was pulled back from a face that showed no emotion. She had been in this chamber for 3 years now, listening to variations of this speech. Every cycle, Thrax speaks with his characteristic diplomacy, Rivaz said, her voice calm and measured, but he omits certain details. The 4 ship classes he references represent our first attempts. The Invincible project. Ah, the Invincible, Thrax interrupted. And now his amusement was open, undisguised. Yes, we have all heard of this project. A ship that has been under construction for 17 years, that has cost your species resources you could not afford, that has absorbed nearly half your military budget in a time when your outer colonies are starving. He straightened to his full height, nearly 3 m of armored scales and bristling dignity. We have watched your shipyards, humans. We have seen the patchwork assembly, the constant revisions, the changes to specifications mid-construction. We have heard your engineers arguing about whether to use your fusion lance design or your plasma cannon design, as though either would matter against a proper Vorn battle cruiser. He made a gesture of dismissal. Your shipyards are not a source of concern. They are a source of entertainment. The chamber erupted in genuine laughter. This time, several species found the contrast between human ambition and human capability genuinely funny. A world that could barely maintain its own infrastructure was asking for interstellar territory. The joke told itself. Riva has waited for the laughter to subside when she spoke again. Her voice was still level, still professional. The Invincible will launch in 3 standard weeks, she said. We invite any interested parties to observe. Thrax's eyes narrowed, an invitation to watch your greatest failure generous. Perhaps we will attend. The Vorn Empire believes in supporting the arts. More laughter. The chamber's mood had shifted entirely, the tension replaced by comfortable condescension. This was what everyone expected from humanity. Earnest requests followed by embarrassed silence followed by retreat. Riva stood, her chair folding back into the floor. The invitation stands, she said. The location will be transmitted to all member worlds, and Thrax, the Vorn ambassador, tilted his head. Bring your best ship, Riva said. You won't want to miss this. She walked out of the chamber before anyone could respond. The laughter followed her down the corridor, echoing off the polished walls, bouncing back at her from a dozen angles. In the Sol system, 58 astronomical units from the sun, Commander Helen A. Vance watched the countdown on her console. The number was familiar to her now, had been familiar for years. 3 weeks, 2 days, 17 hours. The display showed a schematic of the Invincible, its lines brutal and angular, its dimensions grotesque by any standard. The ship was nearly 2 km long, but its shape was all wrong, too wide, too flat. Its weapons mounts distributed in patterns that made no sense to anyone who had studied conventional warfare. It looked like something built by a child. It looked like an industrial accident. It looked like exactly what the galaxy expected from human engineering. Vance smiled. Status report, she said. Her chief engineer, a man named Francisco, who had been with the project since its inception, appeared on her secondary display. His face was covered in grease, his eyes bloodshot from too many sleepless nights. All systems nominal, he said. Final growth phase is proceeding exactly on schedule. The hull is hardening. The internal networks are integrating. She's going to be ready. Growth phase, Vance repeated the word. Still felt strange in her mouth. She had been an engineer for 20 years, had built ships the traditional way for most of that time. This was different. This was something else entirely. We're using the new fabrication protocols, Francisco said. Molecular assembly arrays are generating the final layers now. She'll be fully formed in 2 weeks, then we have 7 days for systems integration and crew familiarization. Vance nodded. Outside the observation window, the massive drydock structure hung against the black of space. It was enormous, a scaffolding of titanium and carbon composite that could have held an entire city, and at its center, wrapped in a web of support beams and umbilical cables, was the Invincible. She looked like a tumor. She looked like a mistake. She looked like nothing the galaxy had ever seen. The Vorn are coming, Vance said. Ambassador Thrax announced it publicly. He's bringing his flagship. Francisco's tired face broke into a grin. The Imperator. That's the one. 2 km of armor, 300 missile tubes, a crew of 15,000. The pride of the Vorn fleet. 17 years. Francisco said, 17 years of them. Laughing at us, watching us through their spy satellites, reporting back to their governments about how backward we are, how primitive our methods are. He shook his head. They have no idea what's been growing in here. Vance turned away from the window. Her reflection stared back at her from the glass, a woman in her 40s, gray, streaking her brown hair, lines etched around her eyes from years of hard work and harder decisions. "Show me the external feeds," she said. The display shifted, multiple windows opened, showing images from alien observation posts scattered throughout the system. The Vorn had maintained a constant watch since the Invincible's keel was laid. The Krell had their own orbital platforms. The Triarchic had deployed listening arrays that could detect a conversation from across the asteroid belt. They had all been watching. They had all been laughing. Vance zoomed in on one of the Vorn feeds. The image showed the dry dock from a distance, the Invincible looking like nothing more than a lump of metal and framework. Labels had been added in the Vorn script, completely unnecessary. Since the feed was already publicly available, they were just showing off. Ugly, one of the labels read. Inefficient, primitive. Another label, smaller, added human. Engineering is a biological necessity. They build like they breed, messy and without purpose. Vance closed the feed. They've been feeding this to their people for years, she said, making us look like fools, building support for their own military expansion by showing how weak we are. And we just let them, Francisco said. We never corrected them, never showed them anything different. Because we couldn't, Vance turned from the window, because if they had seen what we were really building, they would have stopped us. They would have destroyed this project before it ever got started. We had to hide. We had to make them think we were pathetic. She walked to her console and entered a sequence of commands. The schematic of the Invincible transformed, the exterior layers peeling away to reveal the interior. The structure was unlike any ship ever built, not chambers and corridors and compartments, but something closer to a circulatory system. Vast channels for energy transfer. Networks of communication nodes that interconnected in web-like patterns. Power systems that distributed their load across the entire hull rather than concentrating it in vulnerable generators. The design was organic without being biological. It was alive in a way that mechanical systems could never be. When she launches, Vance said, everything changes. The galaxy will see what we've been building. They'll understand why we spent 17 years on one ship. They'll understand why we let them laugh. And Thrax. Vance's smile returned harder this time. Thrax will understand first. He'll be bringing the Imperator to our system, waving his flagship around like a thread. He thinks he's coming to watch failure. She reached out and touched the schematic, her fingers tracing the main weapons channel. He's coming to witness a funeral, she said, his own. 3 weeks later, the dry dock opened. The event was broadcast across every inhabited world in the known galaxy. News networks from 100 species had positioned themselves around the Sol system, their cameras fixed on the scaffold where the Invincible had spent nearly 2 decades in construction. The expectation was universal. Humanity's grand gesture would end in embarrassment. The dock support arms retracted one by one, massive mechanical limbs pulling away from the ship's hull. The Invincible was finally visible, fully revealed, and the galaxy's network. Commentators scrambled to find words. She's the Krell correspondent paused, his mandibles twitching. She's not what We expected, she's much larger. Obviously, but the design is crude. The frame looks like exposed bone. There are no smooth lines, no graceful curves. This is not a ship. This is an object, designed by people who have never seen a proper vessel. The Triarchic commentator agreed. The power distribution appears chaotic. Weapons mounts are placed without apparent logic. The hull lacks the reflective coating used by every civilized species. This ship will be visible to every sensor in the system the moment she powers up. The Vorn network was openly celebratory. The human shipyards have produced exactly what we predicted, the anchor announced, his 4 eyes blinking in sequence, a monument to incompetence. The Invincible is anything but. In fact, we would suggest the humans rename this vessel. The Ignominious has a better ring to it. On Earth, billions watched in silence. They had heard the laughter for years. They had seen their ambassadors mocked, their engineers ridiculed, their culture dismissed. This was supposed to be the moment of vindication. But the ship in the screen looked just as ugly as the aliens said it did. It looked like a mistake. Commander Vance stood on the bridge of the Invincible, surrounded by her crew. The bridge was different from any other. No chairs, no consoles, just a single spherical chamber with walls that could display anything the crew needed to see. Right now, the walls showed the exterior view, the dock retreating into darkness. All systems, she said, final check. A voice responded, not from a speaker, but from the walls themselves. The ship was integrated into every surface, every system, every circuit. The voice was synthesized but warm, the result of millions of hours of programming. All systems at 100% capacity, the ship said. Growth phase complete. Integration phase complete. Ready for launch. Vance closed her eyes for a moment. 17 years of secrecy, of sacrifice, of believing in something that everyone else called impossible. Helms, she said, take us out. The engines didn't roar. They hummed, a deep resonant thrum that vibrated through the deck plates. The Invincible moved away from the dock, her massive frame sliding through the void with an impossible elegance. The observers noticed immediately. Did you see that? The Krell commentator said, his confidence wavering. That movement, that was too smooth. Her mass is enormous. She shouldn't be able to accelerate like that. The Triarchic commentator was silent for a long moment. The thrust signature is wrong. There's no visible exhaust, no plasma flare. What kind of drive system does this vessel use? The Vorn anchor was still defiant. Trick, some kind of illusion. The humans are trying to. The Invincible began to move faster. Her acceleration curve defied physics. Ships of her size required hours to achieve significant velocity. This vessel was reaching speeds that should have been impossible in minutes. The Vorn network went quiet. And then the Imperator arrived. Thrax had positioned his flagship at the edge of the system, waiting for the human vessel to make its first move. He had expected something pathetic, a stumble, a failure, a reason to laugh. Instead, the Invincible was coming toward him fast. Shields up, Thrax ordered, his voice steady despite the knot forming in his stomach. Weapons ready. This is a demonstration. We will not fire first, but we will not be threatened. His bridge crew moved with practiced efficiency. The Imperator was the finest ship in the Vorn fleet, capable of destroying anything short of a capital class vessel. The human ship was huge. Yes, but size wasn't everything. It had no shielding. It had primitive weapons. It had, "Sir," his sensor officer said, his voice shaking, "the human vessel is changing course. She's turning toward us." "Maintain position," Thrax said. "They're trying to intimidate us. It won't work." The Invincible continued her approach. She was close enough now that Thrax could see details of her hull, the massive reinforcement rib, the exposed framework, the weapons mounts that seemed to pulse with internal light. "She's not stopping," the sensor officer said. "She's not slowing down." "Fire a warning shot," Thrax ordered. Across their bow, the Imperator's main battery cycled and fired, sending a burst of plasma across the Invincible's path. It was a gesture, nothing more, a way of saying stay back. The Invincible ignored it. She accelerated instead, her frame filling the Imperator's view screen. "Evasive," Thrax started to say, but he never finished. The Invincible didn't stop. She didn't swerve. She passed so close to the Imperator that her hull scraped against the Vorgan flagship shields, sending sparks of energy crackling across both vessels. And then she was gone, heading deeper into the system at speeds that should have torn any ship apart. Thrax stood frozen, his claws gripping his console. The bridge was silent, except for the hiss of warning systems. "Damage report," he finally managed. "Minimal," his first officer said. "Shields absorbed most of the impact, but..." "Sir?" "But what?" The humans knew. They knew exactly how close they could get. They calculated our shield radius, our defensive reactions, our weapons lock-on times. They flew through our defenses like we weren't even there. Thrax stared at the empty space where the Invincible had been. "Get me the human ambassador," he said. "Now." The call came through while Vance was reviewing the ship's performance data. The Invincible had exceeded every expectation. The engines were operating at 93% efficiency. The hull had absorbed the Vorgan shield impact without damage. The integrated systems had performed flawlessly. "You have a call," the ship's voice said. "The Vorn ambassador." Vance nodded. "Put him through." Thrax's face appeared on the wall, his scales paler than usual, his eyes blinking erratically. "What was that?" he demanded. "What did you just do?" "We launched our ship," Vance said. "You were invited to watch." "That wasn't a launch. That was a demonstration. That was a threat." Vance shook her head. "No, that was a test. We needed to know if she could handle herself against a proper military vessel. You provided the perfect opportunity." Thrax's jaw worked, his teeth grinding together. "Your ship has no shielding. Your weapons are primitive. Your crew is..." "My ship has no shielding because she doesn't need it," Vance interrupted. "Her hull is grown, not built. She can absorb damage that would destroy any conventional vessel. Her weapons aren't primitive. They're integrated into her entire frame. Every surface, every structure can be used for offense or defense. And my crew has been training for this for a decade." She stepped closer to the display, her face filling Thrax's view. "You laughed at us," she said. "Your people, your politicians, your military. You all laughed. You called us primitive. You called us pathetic. You watched our shipyards and told yourself that we were nothing." She paused. We let you laugh. We needed you to. Laugh because if you had taken us seriously, you would have stopped us. But you didn't. You wrote us off. And while you were laughing, we were building something that would change everything. What are you talking about? Thrax demanded. What is that ship? Vance smiled. She's the first, she said, the first of a new kind, a ship that grows, a ship that learns, a ship that adapts to any situation, any enemy, any threat. You've spent 10,000 years building better warships. We spent 17 years building a better way of building. Thrax's eyes went wide. You're saying? I'm saying that the Invincible is proof of concept. She's just the beginning. There are more growing right now in facilities you never found, in shipyards. You never laughed at because you didn't know they existed. She leaned forward. Thrax, you wanted to see what we built. Now you know, and you have 3 options. You can try to destroy this ship and fail. You can tell the galaxy what you've seen and be laughed at, or you can start treating humanity with the respect we've earned. The Vorn ambassador was silent for a long moment, then slowly his scales shifted color, the Vorn equivalent of submission. The galaxy will not believe this, he said. The galaxy will have to, Vance replied. Because when we're done, there won't be a system in known space that doesn't know the name Invincible, and they won't be laughing anymore. She ended the call. On the bridge of the Imperator, Thrax stared at the blank display. His crew was watching him, waiting for orders. Return to Vorn space, he finally said. Maximum speed. He slumped back in his command chair, his mind racing. The humans had done it. They had built something impossible, and somewhere in the depth of his species, intelligence networks, alarms were about to go off. Warships were being rerouted. Defenses were being reassessed. The galaxy was about to change. And Thrax knew with a certainty that settled in his bones like cold that the laughter would never come again.